Hello and welcome to Coming to Know Yourself. It is the new year and I want to thank you for tuning in, and I always appreciate your attention. And I want to, if you watch these videos all the way through, there's always important information. I try not to waste any words. And so this video is my first video of the year, and what we're going to talk about is the way. And a lot of us have our own way of living our lives. We've spent a lot of time and investment and experience throughout our whole life formulating the best way we know how to live. And generally the way we formulate the way we want to live is in a way that we always find happiness, or we're at least looking for happiness, and we're avoiding as much suffering as possible. Making mistakes, falling into situations, or avoiding situations that we've fallen into before. And so as we go through life, we're always living the best way we can. But what if you knew a way in which you didn't have to pursue being happy, or avoid suffering, or wonder in times of being by yourself what life is all about, or have that feeling of dissatisfaction inside, that life just isn't quite where you want it to be, or that you're constantly wanting something more, or that no matter how hard we try to find happiness, it just always seems to escape us. The moment we think we feel good about life and that we're having joy in our lives, it seems to just kind of slip through our fingers, kind of fades away, and we're always looking for that next thing to feel content, and feel like our purpose in life is fulfilling, and that we are truly happy with ourselves, and that we are living in that kind of joy of just getting up every day. But a lot of times in life it's very difficult to find that way, and suffering seems to be at least a small part of our lives in one form or another. But it doesn't have to be that way. And there's a reason why we tend to struggle with the balance between being happy and always falling into some sort of struggle, suffering, sadness, dissatisfaction, and always wanting more and wondering why we can't seem to find that ultimate goal of the pursuit of happiness. And so I want to take you back to the beginning, when we were all first born. And when we were first born, we all have pre-knowledge that we're born with, kind of like animals have their pre-knowledge, the knowledge that allows them to have their natural instincts, that guides them through life to be who they are. A bird doesn't try to be a bear, and a dog doesn't try to be an alligator. They don't have any inner conflict with who they are, and they don't have that kind of suffering that humans have, where they're hating themselves, where they have regret and guilt and shame. And they might feel in trouble when a human rebukes them for peeing on the carpet like a dog, and feel shame for it, but they don't wake up the next morning feeling and remembering that they were told that they were not a good person or a good dog. They empty their hearts and they're right back to who they were the next day. And so that's because they have their natural instincts that they live life by, and they're not easily manipulated by their experiences. They always have faith in that pre-knowledge that they're born with, and they live by that knowledge, not the circumstantial knowledge outside of them. If an animal is abused, they might have lack of trust for, let's say males, if they were abused by males. But it doesn't make it so that inside of themselves they are hating something about themselves, if that experience had negative things, like if a person's telling you you're a terrible person and treating you like crap. They don't have that lasting effect of things that cause them to have these voices that make them have inner conflict. their cup is always empty in the next day, and they're always being true to themselves, which is, loving themselves, enjoying their life, and content with who they are, regardless of the circumstances. And so we are also born with pre-knowledge of our natural instincts when we're first born. If we didn't have some sort of set of knowledge that we're born with, we would not even know how to live or be alive. We would not even be conscious or aware. The knowledge that we're born with is the knowledge of the knowledge of unity, of oneness, of relationship to all things, to be conscious and aware, completely connected to all of life, and to fully understand our beingness, our purpose in life. And that knowledge, that pre-knowledge we're born with, is the absolutes of love and the absolutes of truth. And the absolutes of love are the knowledge of relationship, of relating to reality, of uniting, connecting in that kind of open we mentality, us mentality. And the absolutes of truth is knowing the meaning of life, our purpose that gives us meaning, why we exist, who we are. And that is the knowledge that defines when we are first born as who we are. It is our perspective on life, and it defines our self-reflection of who we are. It's the image that we see ourselves as, and it's what we identify with. And you can see that in little children. They have that identifying personality of who they are through that pre-knowledge. They love life. They can't wait to get up. They're running around playing. They have endless energy. They have this light in their eyes. They're not struggling with inner conflict. They don't hate themselves. They're not judging themselves. They don't have heaviness in their heart. They're not lacking contentment of their situation. They're just kind of hanging out and taking in whatever's there and enjoying life. And that starts to fade at about 2 years old and begins to slowly disappear. And we'll talk about that in another video. But this video is to talk about how in the beginning we had a perfect, ideal outlook on life, pre-knowledge that gave us our own identity, our own self-image. And that knowledge guided us to be who we are, how to relate to life. And it was the knowledge of love and the knowledge of the meaning of life, the truth. In the scriptures, it's referred to in Genesis where it says, "And God made man in his own image and in our likeness and in his likeness." And what they're referring to is the image, kind of like on a compilation of knowledge, kind of like when it says in the scriptures, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and the Word was with God. And so the Word is knowledge that allows perception. All the knowledge we've ever gathered gives us the understanding that we have right now of life, and gives us the way to see life, to see ourselves, and the way to go about living life. And so in the beginning, we were given a set of pre-knowledge to live life and see ourselves and identify with who we are through that pre-knowledge. And that pre-knowledge gave us perfect love for ourselves. We had no self-hate. We didn't doubt who we are. We were connected to everyone. We didn't fear people. We didn't judge people. We didn't even have human language. We didn't even relate to language. We felt reality. We were living through the heart rather than through the mind. And we knew the meaning of life because we knew that we are the life and that our experience of life is us. And that feeling of that meaning of life was inner peace, the feeling of our own existence, our presence, our spirit, which is our awareness, the inner self. And so we weren't seeking happiness outside of ourselves. We were just simply being. And, obviously, if people are mean to us or hungry or we fall and we hurt something, we can still, hurt. But as far as having this constant struggle inside, this suffering inside, this self-hate, this, bowing down to people's judgments, waking up in the morning depressed, those kind of things didn't exist when we were first born. And we had the fullness inside of ourselves. We didn't have a broken heart. We weren't seeking to fill a void. And we were whole. And that image was who we truly were and are. And that self-image still exists deep in our psyche, deep below our own conscious perception right now. And it is why we seek peace, why we seek happiness, why we seek joy, why we seek understanding of life. Because we walked away from it, we forgot it, we lost it at a young age. And it's not that it's gone forever, it's just that it's so far in our memory, so far away, that we lost that way of living. And so Jesus, in his scriptures, talks about how he has the way back to that truth, that image that God made us in, to restore that life that we were born with. And even if you're not into scriptures or, Jesus, that doesn't mean that you still can't restore that self-identity that you were born with. It's still there, that pre-knowledge, that perfect innocence. And innocence isn't like you made a mistake and now you lost your innocence, or you had sex before marriage and now you've lost your innocence. Innocence is inner sense. And when we're children, we are fully in that inner sense of that pre-knowledge, our natural instincts, that image that we are born with, that we identify with as who we are. And then as we grow up, farther and farther away, we forget about that image, that natural instinct of who we are, and we lose that inner sense. And as we grow up, our minds and our hearts become adulterated, corrupted. That's why we become adults, because our minds and our hearts are now adulterated, and now we're adults because we've been adulterated. Our minds and our hearts have been corrupted, and that image that we were first born in has been lost. And we've created a new image. As we go about life, we start to be influenced by the outside things and the outside people and their way of being and their judgments and their advice. And we're taught, because everybody else has forgotten who they are, we're taught to seek identifying with knowledge and gathering new knowledge instead of using that pre-knowledge, the natural instincts we're born with to live life. Now we are taught that we are ignorant, we don't know anything. We need to listen and pay attention and listen to adults and teachers and fill our minds now with a new self-identity, a new self-image, that we now are creating ourselves for a new personality, a new personal reality. We had a personality of love, peace and truth and joy and contentment inside, and that personality was our personal reality. And now we've lost that, and now we're struggling to create a personal reality or a personality to live life a way that gives us that love, that peace, that joy. But no matter how we seem to alter our personality, our character, and add to our understanding and try to live life our own way with all the knowledge we've gathered outside of ourselves, we seem to always be struggling in some way, some fashion, suffering in some way, always pursuing happiness, never quite content, and often wishing we had that joy that's in a child's eyes and that energy that they have. And so what has happened is we've traded one self-identity for another, the positive polarity of what we were, loving our own selves, our own lives, that peace, that joy, and now we've got the negative polarity, the human identity, the self-image that we've created as humans. So the polarity of light and the polarity of darkness. And the darkness is the ignorance of forgetting who we are, and that darkness is the suffering, and it is the negative polarity. It's the contrast of what we are not, and we are now seeking to come back to what we truly are. And we wouldn't be seeking it if we hadn't been it already. We wouldn't be wanting happiness, wanting peace, wanting joy, wanting bliss, wanting that heaven, that place of just no suffering, if we hadn't been that already. And that's what Jesus talks about when he refers to as the kingdom of heaven. The kingdom is a state of heart and a state of mind, and heaven is the original perception of seeing life the way we were born. We just didn't know that we were born in heaven and came here with heaven in us and experiencing it. We just didn't realize the value we had experiencing that, and so we kind of just took it for granted. We're like, yeah, I'm at peace, I'm blissful, I'm this heavenly body, I'm in perfect, non-suffering, and now I'm going to focus all my attention on this human life and what it's all about, because I don't know anything about it. And so we got so caught up, focused on this human life, we got influenced and corrupted our minds and our hearts with a new self-identity. And so that divided our hearts and created a void, because we're struggling between being who we were born with, that self-identity, our pre-knowledge of love and truth, and now the identity that we have now, the knowledge of darkness, the negativity, the suffering, the lack of understanding, that seeking, that wanting, that yearning. And that's why in the scriptures, Jesus says, if thine eye be single, then thy whole body be full of light. And the eye he's talking about is perception, how we see life. God made us in the image, in his likeness, to see life through his eyes, to experience heaven in us, in our hearts, in our minds, in our souls, to have heaven with us no matter where we're at. And because we have that void in our hearts, we're divided between two self-identities, once living the way of love and truth, and now living the way of suffering and uncertainty and wanting and yearning and striving and struggle and trying to make our own way. That darkness is the human polarity. It is the uncertainty. It is the lack of understanding. It is that drive of want, that constant pursuit of happiness, that dissatisfaction, that suffering. And that is the darkness. And so that's why he says, if thine eye be full of darkness, then our whole body be full of darkness. So to be single would be to discard that human identity, let go of everything we've ever learned, everything we believe in, all of our opinions, all our judgments, and learn to come back to the way of our natural instincts, to learn to live only in the attributes and the knowledge of love, and to come back to our true self, to awaken to that truth of our real being, of who we really are, not this human self-identity, but who we were before we had a self-identity of a human. When we were first born, we didn't know we had a name. We didn't have any experiences. We didn't have a past. We didn't have memories. We were just in the now. We were in the moment, just living and being. And we knew that truth of who we are because it was constantly in us, and we were feeling it and experiencing it, and it told us we were alive and that we existed. And it was just a truth that we simply knew, and we gave it no thought. That's why we forgot it, because we just took it for granted. We're like, yeah, that's me. But now we've created another identity on top of that, a human self-identity. And so that feeling inside that tells us who we really are, that truth that gives us the meaning of life, is so vague. We just don't identify with it anymore. We identify more with the feeling of our lives as this human identity, that we just forgot what it really means to experience and be that truth that gives us the real meaning of life, that gives us purpose and makes us feel like we really, we belong in our own soul. And so that feeling that tells us who we are, and the feeling of our own being, when you don't remember it, it's still there. But now when we're all by ourselves and we have no distractions, and we're not really focused on identifying with our human identity, our personality, our ego, where we're trying to be validated by other people and accepted, and we're just by ourselves, there's a feeling that we know it's always there. It never changes. We go throughout life with, experiencing many things, many feelings come and go, many feelings change. But there's one feeling that's always there, And when we're all by ourselves, we know it by saying, this feeling is the feeling of being alone. That alone feeling is not the same as feeling lonely or isolated. Two different things. Feeling lonely and isolated is the recognition that we haven't been being true to ourselves. We haven't been, living through love and connection and unity and community with others. We're feeling isolated inside because we haven't been connecting. That's loneliness. Alone, the feeling of being alone is just the recognition that you exist. That alone feeling is the feeling and recognition of your presence, your spirit, your awareness, your self. It is the self-awareness when you recognize it as who you really are. It is the I am that tells you you exist. And that alone feeling feels separate from us, like it's a casual observation. But when you can come back to knowing that feeling as who you really are, to make your I single again, to wake up to that truth that Jesus says, and you shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. That truth, that feeling of alone becomes the feeling of all one. And it becomes you, rather than an observation outside of you. That feeling of alone merges with you, and you wake up and remember that that is you. And that feeling, that of alone feeling, has never changed. It's never gone up. It's never gone down, because it's the feeling of the true inner peace. It is the sameness, the constant, because it is our being. It's the thing that that tells us the meaning of life, because we are the life, and we are the meaning to our existence. It tells us that we exist. It gives us that meaning that we are alive. Without that feeling, that recognition, that awareness, that feeling of being alone in that all one feeling, we wouldn't even know we exist. So that's knowledge that we have, that we're born with. That's called self-knowledge. The knowledge of the I am, the presence, the memory of presence, of being. Just like in Spinoza says, I feel, therefore I am. And so we can take that and say, I feel this alone feeling, therefore this is what I am. And what I am feeling is my being, and what I am being is who and what I am. Everything that we experience in reality is actually through feeling, not like physical touch, but emotional feeling, intuitive feeling. Kind of like, when you feel happy, and when you feel sad. It's not because something physical going on. It's internal first. You might physically have things that happen with the body when you're happy or sad. But internally, emotionally, intuitively, you know these feelings. You experience them. And the same is with that alone feeling. You intuitively know what it is to feel peace and happiness, and you long to have it back. You long to have that joy. And it's always with us. That alone feeling is that peace, that inner knowing of that peace, that happiness, that contentment. Because happiness truly is contentment. It's not that seeking of want and then satisfying a want and then feeling happy for a moment. That's pleasure. And so when our hearts and our minds are divided, and our minds are not, and our perception is not single, we're filled with darkness. And it is that darkness, that secondary image of that knowledge we've created as a human identity, the negative polarity of our life, that hides the full experience of being that all one feeling. And that instead of being alone, it hides that alone feeling as all one. And it's like our emotional being is normally a perfect still pond. And all that negativity in the human identity is creating ripples on the pond. And we're not able to fully experience that inner peace, that truth of who we are, that tells us the meaning of our life, that we exist and who we really are. And so we're kind of victim and subject to life and circumstances telling us what life is and who we are, by all these feelings bombarding us through our senses. And that is how we identify with the meaning of life. But that's so temporary and false. It passes and changes constantly. And it makes us really, a slave to, all our circumstances telling us what the meaning of life is, whether it's good, whether it's bad, whether it's fulfilling, whether it's not, whether we struggle, whether we don't. But we never had all this stuff when we were first born. We didn't care about what was going on in the world outside of us. We were just being. And we had that inner peace. We had that contentment, that happiness, that joy inside of us. And we just wanted to share it with people. We ran around, we played with kids. Time flew by. We weren't concerned about, the world outside of us giving us meaning of life or telling us how to be. We knew inside intuitively, and then we kind of slowly walked away from that. And so coming to know yourself is coming back to knowing that original self, coming back to that pre-knowledge, coming back to that way, that truth, that life, and letting go of the human identity, the human way of living. We can't have both. We can't serve two masters. We have to choose. And the human life is never meant to be permanent. It's just a way to gather hindsight, perspective, contrast. That's why it's the darkness. Just like in a negative in a photo, it's the negative experience. Excuse me. It's the negative experience to give us contrast, to really allow us to come to know who we really are, which is that inner peace, that inner knowing, that love, that truth. And truly appreciate it so we don't lose it again. And so the human identity is just wisdom. It's the hindsight. It's the, if I only knew then, when I was first born, what I know now, I would have never walked away from who I truly am. I would have stuck with just the knowledge I was born with. And I would have just left the human ideology and the human way of thinking to somebody else. I would have never listened to somebody else telling me the meaning of life, and adopting any of these opinions and judgments in life. So Jesus, he has a path called the way, the truth, and the life. And I followed that path. And the way he teaches is how to come back to that image that God made us in. And because he discovered and became that way, that image God made us in became the Christ image. Jesus personified that image of who we truly are, to bring it out in the open so that we can understand and see that pre-knowledge that we were born with of who we are out here as a living example. And even if you're not into the scriptures, the basic premise of it is that love, learning to love yourself and others, and to let go of all negativity, all judgment, all opinions, and to make love the most important thing in life. To come to know that knowledge like it's your instincts again, to have faith and love, and to let go of the negative polarity, the judgment, the opinions, the sarcasm, the pride, the arrogance, just like as Jesus says, if you humble yourself like a little child, then you will see the kingdom of heaven. What he actually said was, if you do not humble yourself, you will not see the kingdom of heaven. And he's basically trying to get us to come back to being like the little child that we were, so that we can see through that lens. The image that God made us in is to allow us to see through God's lens, to experience life the way he experiences life. And he also said he made us in his image and our image. And when he was referring to is our mother. And our mother is Mother Earth. And our nature, the pre-knowledge we're born in here, is also out there in Mother Nature. She teaches how to be in nature. If you observe nature and how it's peaceful and everything is united, everything lives in harmony, and how everything is consistent and balanced and reliable, all the seasons, everything is continually going and persevering, no matter how bad the weather is, how things storm, whether things are tumultuous, no matter what's going on, the nature is always consistently united and living in peace and harmony. And so our Mother Nature teaches us our nature inside we're born with. God made us in his own image and gave us that knowledge of the absolutes of love and truth. inside of us, so we are always carrying it with us. And if earth hadn't been corrupted, earth would be heaven on earth. And so Jesus talks about how in order to come back to that image, first we must be born of water and of spirit to enter the kingdom of heaven. The kingdom is the mind, and heaven is to enter that state of mind, to see through that likeness again, to enter back into being who we truly are in that truth that sets us free. And to be born of water is to cleanse the inside of the cup. As Jesus says, first clean the inside of the cup, which is our hearts, and everything else will be taken care of. And so he talks about the way, which is to love perfectly, to always choose to love yourself and to love others as you love yourself, and to love ourselves perfectly. The measure we love ourselves is how we love others. And so it's all about loving ourselves perfectly so that we have the ability to see in the perfect light. To make thine eye be single is also to make thy heart single, to not be divided between the negative polarity and the positive polarity, to always be positive, to never be judgmental, to always forgive, to always be in kindness, to learn that to live through the attributes of love is the way back to that inner peace, to coming to know ourselves, the attributes that we truly are: kindness, forgiveness, gentleness, no judgment, acceptance of ourselves, acceptance of others, and not accepting people's bad behavior, but just forgiving them for their ignorance and not getting emotionally angry about it and judging them and thinking they're a bad person and being self-righteous and thinking we're better than they are, but just giving them grace, giving them patience, giving them, being understanding of their situation, that they're living the best way they can. It's all about keeping peace on the inside. And so learning the attributes of love, being consistent, reliable, treating people equally as you love yourself, having balance, living in harmony with everything and everyone, seeking not to hurt anyone or yourself. All of these attributes of love cleans the inside of the cup. They are what Jesus calls the living water, which you will, when you thirst of this living water, then when you take in this living water, you're reborn of water and you'll never thirst again, because you'll have that spirit, that Christ image, the attributes of love inside of you again, and you will see through the likeness of God again. You'll have that heaven on earth, because you'll be whole again. You'll be holy. The heart is the holy grail. The wholeness is an empty heart of want, of yearning, of personal desire, of self-gratification. It's all about selflessness, because we don't really need anything. All we need is what we were born with, and learning to have faith in that all the attributes of love will lead us to that best, perfect experience of life, and then waking up to that truth. Fasting from all this emotional stimulation, all this sensory stimulation, the self-gratification, the escapism, and coming back to knowing that alone feeling is who we are, becoming one with it again, making peace in our minds and in our hearts with that alone feeling, and learning to love it. It is the inner peace. It is the self-awareness. Waking up to that alone feeling being who we really are, not this feeling of this body or the feeling of our self-identity as a human. Letting go of that, letting go of the ego, letting go of all the knowledge we've ever learned before we were born, after we were born, and coming back to feeling and coming to know that alone feeling more than any feeling we've ever known. Come to know that alone feeling as who we are, just as much as we know how to be happy and how to be sad. We know those two feelings. No one can tell us that we don't know those feelings and what they are, and when we're being them. We need to know that alone feeling as the contrast between the human identity and that alone feeling as our true identity, and see the contrast and choose to be only that alone feeling. Come back to being all one in that feeling as who we are. That is our awareness, our self-awareness. It is the recognition of our presence, our being. And when our minds are single and our eyes are single, then our hearts and our body and our souls are full of light. And that alone feeling is the all one feeling, because then we're only feeling inner peace and love for ourselves and the bliss, and we're no longer struggling and suffering, because we know that truth of who we are. And so The way is not a way where you come back to yourself and then you're done. The way is learning to live the way, the narrow path, and always living it forever so that we never fall off that path of being that way and go back into that negative polarity and have, loving ourselves and then treating others exactly how we should be treating ourselves, which is through love. Always loving others, whether they're someone that's not pleasurable or someone that we find pleasure in, whether we agree with someone or we don't. Always loving people, always being patient and kind, extending that grace, always being meek, but also strong. And we'll also talk about how being through in that love, not being taken advantage of, having personal boundaries, and not being, a part of that is having self-respect, loving yourself so that people can't take advantage of that and put guilt on us and try to take more of us than we want to give. Because it's not about always giving everybody else everything. It's just about always being peaceful when we're in situations. Giving of ourselves in that love, even when people don't resonate with who we are. We've been taught to love people that are really just like who we are and accept only those who look a certain way, act a certain way, be a certain way. Those are our people, and everybody else we kind of just give them a lesser version of ourselves. We don't accept who they are. They're weird. They're not who we are. We divide ourselves up into groups. To learn to love and be peaceful and kind and joyful around all personality types, all kinds of people, to not be judgmental, to not be opinionated, to not like this person and not like that person, to judge this person and not judge that person, to not fall into self-righteousness. All of these things are to keep our cup empty of all that heaviness, that darkness, that negativity, and to always live the way of love. And to live the way of love keeps us in that truth, because when we're in that negative polarity, we lose that all one feeling. We lose that experience of our true self, that inner knowing of who we are, because we lose that feeling of that alone feeling, that all one feeling of who we are, when we shift into being that human identity, that negative polarity. When we shift out of inner peace and being peaceful to others, we shift out of that feeling. We lose that feeling, going into that negative polarity of that judgment. And so walking the way is to always walk the path of peace, and the attributes of love is the attributes of peace. First, we learn to love ourselves, and then we extend that love to others. So we learn to find peace in ourselves and to not, have that self-loathing, that self-hate, to forgive ourselves, and then we forgive others, which also helps forgive ourselves. It's a cycle. We express love, we give ourselves love, and if we need to love others more and be of service before we can learn to love ourselves, that's another way of doing it. Jesus teaches both the way of outwardly expressing love and inwardly expressing love. And so outwardly expressing love teaches us how to be worthy of love, self-respect, to create boundaries, and to learn to forgive ourselves by forgiving others, to reflect by treating others, that reflects upon us how to treat ourselves. And then we fill ourselves with that love, and then we learn the wisdom of love to always be true to it and have faith in love. Because like it says, God is love, and if we abide in love, we abide in God, and God abides in us. And so whether you're spiritual or believe in God or not, love is the absolute truth. It will lead you to the greatest experience of life. It will lead you to a way of living that will give you the greatest opportunities and the greatest outcomes. But in order to have those blessings, that greatest outcomes, we have to choose a way. We can't sometimes be in love and sometimes be selfish and in the negativity and the judgment and the self-righteousness, the path of darkness and the path of light, the path of life and the path of death. We have to choose and be dedicated. One is the narrow path, and the other one is the wide path, which leads to the destruction, the suffering. We have to choose one. And so my channel will teach the way to come back to ourselves, to cleanse the cup of our trauma or suffering, to learn to love ourselves, to learn to love others, to have faith in that love, and the way to come back to that truth, which is to come to know and awaken to our true self. And we'll have more videos about awakening to our truth of who we are and emptying that cup so that our eyes are single and our whole being is full of light and we can get that darkness out of us. Until then, this video is about how we were born with pre-knowledge, a different way of life that we left behind for the human way of life. We left the positive polarity to experience the negative polarity, and it was meant to be that way. We were meant to be what religion calls sin, which is simply living in ignorance and failing to hit the mark, so that we can learn to have that hindsight, so we can come back to hitting that mark and no longer living in ignorance, in darkness, in not knowing the meaning of life. It was all part of the journey here to come back to ourselves, to have that hindsight, to have that wisdom. If I only knew then what I know now. So, in the Latin, the word sin meaning to live in ignorance, to fail to hit the mark, it's not a bad thing. It's what we're meant to do, but eventually we're supposed to come full circle and come back to ourselves and to come back to that love, to be reconnected to all of reality, to live in that unity consciousness, that connection, that relationship to all things, that oneness of all things, and which connects us to God and connects us to Mother Earth and connects us to everyone and keeps us in that inner peace and in that love. And so that is the way that we lived when we were first born and we forgot. And so coming to know yourself is about coming back to that pre-knowledge, that instinctual way of living and seeing life and awakening to that truth. And so we will have more videos about how to do that, but this is just the introduction to the way that we have lost and the way to come back to that way that truly gives us that happiness, that contentment, that joy, that love, that meaning of life, that purpose. Until then, Happy New Year, and to more blessings and to a wonderful year all the way through. Take care, and I'm always thinking about you, and I'm sorry for your suffering. I know that this journey is difficult, and we'll one video at a time, we'll do it together. Until then, take care.